Hey guys, welcome to the 2019 Fantasy Football Primer. And Dopp, let's get to it. The bell cows, the guys everyone's looking for at the top of their draft, the running backs. So start me off simple, wean me into it. The tier one guys, the absolute can't miss dudes at the top of this draft. How deep is that group going?
Can't miss guys are Saquon Barkley. I do not care if they put 15 men in the box. I'm still going with Saquon because he can catch the ball out of the backfield too.
Dave Gettleman is salivating, by the way, at the idea of can I put 15 guys
Am I allowed to do that?
Can I put more hog mollies?
After him, for me, it's CMC. I love Christian McCaffrey, what he's doing in that offense. Incredible pass catcher. Underrated runner, in my opinion. I think he's going to get more run this year. Number 3 for me is Alvin Kamara, especially with Mark Ingram leaving the Saints. I know they got Latavius Murray, but that dude is just a monster. He's incredible. And then number 4 for me is Zeke. Everything that he's doing in that Dallas offense, I'm hoping there's not going to be a holdout or anything that happens. We'll see as that situation is a little bit fluid. But those 4 are my tier 1, and that's really sort of by itself with those guys.
Yeah, I would say all the ones you make sense. Offenses we expect to be great, and guys who are going to get a ton of touches.
Yep.
No real timeshares to worry about there. So what's the drop-off like then, tier 2, the next wave of guys, and how big is that gap really in your mind?
Yeah, it's not huge. You're not going to get one of those first 4 guys unless you're drafting in the first 4 picks. That's just all that there is to it. A guy like David Johnson or Melvin Gordon or Joe Mixon, Le'Veon Bell, James Conner, Todd Gurley, those guys are my tier 2 guys that, based on the rest of your league, could maybe fall to you in the middle of the first round, or maybe towards the end or end of the first round, or even early second round with some of these guys. So for me, I love David Johnson. You and I had this conversation about Kyler Murray.
He's fascinating to me because of the way that offense is going to change. And just remembering Cliff Kingsbury from when I got to cover him in college at Texas Tech, they threw the ball to a running back a ton. So it should be David Johnson back to normal, right?
Exactly. You would think that with that offense, everything that Kyler is doing there, not only on the ground, but then being able to catch those passes, he should be fantastic. Le'Veon Bell is another big question mark for me in that tier 2 because after taking a whole year off of football and then going to the Jets aren't the greatest team in the world. There's a big drop-off between, and I love Sam Darnold and what it is that he has as potential, but he's not Ben Roethlisberger right now. So is he still going to catch all the passes that he did when he was in Pittsburgh? Is he still going to get all the yardage? That offensive line is totally different than that Pittsburgh offensive line. As an offensive lineman, you tell me, should I be worried about what the Jets have there in front of Le'Veon Bell?
Yeah, listen, it's not the best group, and it's certainly not the quality of the Pittsburgh offensive line, a top 5 group in all of football, but Le'Veon is the quality of back that you can assume makes for a better group in front, can enhance what you're doing up front and even cover for some of those deficiencies. And so he's interesting because he's got kind of the weight of the running back world on his shoulder, which kind of brings me to the other guy that did that. Todd Gurley last year was the guy that got paid, that Le'Veon Bell wanted to be. And we saw down the stretch of the season, all of a sudden, when you are splitting time with C.J. Anderson and talking about the degenerative knee, I start to get a little worried. How worried are you for him going into this fantasy season?
I am worried. For me, and not necessarily that he won't be able to play a full season or that he couldn't be effective, but for me, the way that I draft in the first round, I want to be as risk-averse as possible. You can't win the draft in the first, but you can absolutely lose it. If you take a guy that doesn't play or plays really poorly, that can just sink your fantasy team. So the idea that I can't take Todd Gurley anywhere before probably 10 to 14 for me personally, because if something happens with that knee and he sits out 8 games, you just lost your first rounder and the guy that's supposed to be your bell cow. So with the addition of Darrell Henderson in that offense, and hopefully we'll see what it is that he does, maybe there's a really good complement of them being able to work it out so that Todd Gurley can still be uber efficient, because that's part of where his value came from. He's just so efficient on the ground. And he won't get as many touches, but he's going to play a little bit lighter this year, I think, but he's 6 to 8 pounds lighter than what he has been. So we'll see where that works out. But I am passing on Todd Gurley unless I am in the back half of the first, hopefully maybe early second, I could get him there. And then I think it's worth the risk for what it is that he could be. I just am not going to take him early.
I'm glad you mentioned Darrell Henderson. We'll get to some late round sleepers in a little bit. Really exciting rookie. But another rookie that I see right on this list below Todd Gurley is Josh Jacobs. A lot of change in the air out in the way of the now Oakland Raiders. But Josh Jacobs, what got you excited about him?
Everything about Josh Jacobs got me excited about him. He landed in an offense where he's going to be the guy. He doesn't have someone there to really take touches away. If you're worried about Jalen Richard, he'll get his to spell him.
Don't be.
But that's it. He's not a guy you have to worry about a running back by committee. You know the way that John Gruden Raiders offense wants to be. They want to pound it. He's always been a guy that wants to run the football down people's throats. And so from that standpoint, with Derek Carr and Antonio Brown, that offense should be a little bit better. Interested to see how it's going to work out. But with that AB adding Tyrell Williams, if they can get into the red zone, he's the kind of guy that could be a really good goal line back and put touchdowns on the board for you. So on top of just being the guy there, as far as red zone percentage and red zone usage, I think that he's going to be really valuable from that standpoint.
A lot of great opportunities for a young back there. And God, you just keep feeding me perfect segues, Dopp. Goal line back, guy we think of for that, the poster child maybe, is Derrick Henry. We've all been sitting around and waiting for some of what we got, especially towards the end of last year. You get the 200-plus yards game.
Yep.
I am begging them to hook it to my veins. And so now what do we do with this season? What is Derrick Henry to you?
Derrick Henry is tough. So what he did last year, and I'm glad that the coaches finally realized what all of us average people have known, where it's just give Derrick Henry the football.
Yes, we all have the answers.
We've known it for a long time.
You're welcome, Mike Vrabel.
But here's the question. Can Derrick Henry be that good over a 16-game slate? He's still got Deion Lewis. He's not a good pass catcher.
Yep.
And it's not that he can't catch the ball. It's just not a skill set that they utilize, and they've got a guy in Deion Lewis who's going to do that anyways. So my biggest concern is not whether or not he can run the ball or if he can be effective. It's that schedule. You look at what they have. They play the Colts twice. So you have Andrew Luck in that high-flying offense. They play the Chiefs, Patrick Mahomes. You know they're going to air it out. They play the Falcons, Matt Ryan, Julio Jones, Calvin Ridley. They play the Chargers, the Saints, and then they play Deshaun Watson and the Texans twice, obviously. So there are so many high-powered, high-scoring offenses where if the Titans get down, Derrick Henry's not going to be able to run the ball 20 times a game, and that's where his value really comes, to be able to slow the game down, to be able to have those closer scoring games, and let's cram it down someone's throat. If they're playing teams that are going to score 35 points on him, Derrick Henry is not going to have the usage that we're all hoping he's going to have.
Game flow dependent could be tough there. God, maybe Vrabel goes and looks back at the New England playbook and says, maybe we just do some of that at the beginning and keep those offenses off the field. But might be wishful thinking. New England doing it and everyone else, kind of a different story. All right, we mentioned it before, though. Some late-round guys, especially some rookies that you might be able to pick up, fill out a roster with that you could get some solid bang for.
Totally. I mean, there's a couple of guys that I really like. Unfortunately, I feel like they ended in some spots where there's a little bit of a running back by committee. Really love the idea of David Montgomery in Chicago, except for Mike Davis is there, and I think they want to utilize Mike Davis. So Montgomery could be really good, but we'll have to see how that workload shakes out. Plus, you've got Tariq Cohen still there catching passes. I really like what they have in Philly, adding Miles Sanders in the draft this year, but they still have Jordan Howard. And they brought him in this year specifically to be able to utilize him in that short yardage role. And then they just signed Darren Sproles. Apparently, Darren Sproles just doesn't age.
He will be playing. The year is 2035, and Darren Sproles is starting his 1,000th NFL game.
100%. But he's not. I mean, he's a guy that they're going to use on those 3rd and 9 draws and those short to intermediate passing plays. And so it makes it tough for those two guys who I really like a lot coming out of college, to be able for me to feel like, okay, they're going to be the same kind of Josh Jacobs tier where he doesn't have someone to have to worry about. So the only other thing that I want to touch on is the running backs that were PPR monsters in previous years.
Yes, I was going to say, this is a big change you're saying, which kind of goes counter to the idea of value for running backs in the NFL right now, where on the top end we're saying these guys aren't worth as much as they used to be. You're saying fantasy's the opposite.
Totally. I mean, I think there's a little bit to be said for the death of the PPR running back, PPR-only running back. So you look at guys like Theo Riddick or Duke Johnson or Giovanni Bernard, where 2 or 3 years ago, those guys, you could draft them as your RB2, knowing they're barely going to run between the tackles, but they get so many catches, they'll still finish inside the top 20 by the time we get to the end of the year. The only reason that happened was because the guys in front of them were not as good as the guys they have now. You had Amir Abdullah and Jeremy Hill and Isaiah Crowell in front of those guys. So in front of Giovanni Bernard, they've got Joe Mixon now, who they really like a lot and is also a great pass catcher in his own right. And then you look at what they have in Cleveland, in front of Duke Johnson, not just Kareem Hunt, who's going to come back at the end of the year, but obviously you've got
Nick Chubb, who emerged at the end of last year, who was dynamite.
He killed it. He was fantastic. So you've got all these guys where you used to be able to count on them. Now it feels like James White, Tariq Cohen, maybe are the only two guys that you can really count on as being I'm not going to run the football a lot, but I'm still going to catch enough passes to be a low-end RB2 or a high-end flex. Those other guys have just sort of fallen off the radar. Hey guys, thanks for watching ESPN on YouTube. For more great ESPN streaming content, download the ESPN app and subscribe to ESPN Plus.